Hello, my friends. It's Andy coming to you live from Orange County, California. And I have a special guest today. You may not recognize her. Her name is Hedieh, my lovely wife. How are you?
I'm great. My favorite interview of all today.
Very good. One thing I want to tell you is that if something were to happen, if you're watching this on Facebook or Twitter, one other location you can find is on YouTube. Just go to theandyfalcoshow.com. theandyfalcoshow.com. I also have a podcast, and it is called theandyfalcopodcast.com. Go there, and you'll be able to find it on Apple Podcasts. We're going to be talking about what's happening in Afghanistan, and I figured, what better guest could I have than Hedieh Mirahmadi, a leading expert in counterterrorism. You've spent time with several presidents under their administration, advising them through the FBI and some other contracts you've had with the U.S. government. So if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about your experience so that people understand what gives you the authority to be able to come on this amazing show called The Andy Falco Show and share all of your expertise in this area.
Other than being your wife.
Other than being my wife.
Okay. Yes. I actually began my career in counterterrorism in Southern California. I had connected myself with a couple of FBI agents who back in the mid-90s were investigating the rise of radical Islam here in the United States. It was at the time when there was only 2 Arab-speaking FBI employees in the entire country. They didn't have computers that can access the external internet. They only had an intranet. And it was, fast forward, it was a passion of mine. I'm trained as an attorney, but counterterrorism and research became a passion of mine. I moved to DC. I worked for a number of NGOs, for some think tanks. I was appointed by President George W. Bush Jr. to serve in Afghanistan. And after that, I've spent countless number of years under various administrations, every administration since W, doing either grant work, contract work, going overseas, writing reports, coming back, and spending time basically studying radical Islam and what were the community-based programs that would serve as a barrier to radicalization and recruitment to terrorism. And my last stint before I left DC was at FBI headquarters building a national terrorism prevention program that unfortunately got stopped once Trump came into power. But it was a great idea.
Yeah. So what's important, I think, and I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but I just want to make sure that it does get mentioned, that you were Muslim at the time.
Yes, absolutely. I was Muslim at the time. I was Muslim. I actually decided to leave Islam when I was at the FBI, and I came out here to California, and I had a radical personal encounter with Jesus Christ in my home after watching a series of YouTube videos. Story for another day.
So that brings me to a question that I asked you on an earlier show that we were on together, our Living Fearless devotional that we do on a daily basis. But we mentioned it, yeah, and we have somebody that's on right now from Afghanistan. But
am I noticing that? Assad from Kabul.
We'll get to his message in one second. But I want to ask you, as a Muslim at that time,
yes,
at the time of 9/11 and everything that was going on in our country, what was your... Did you have an intent as a Muslim coming in the U.S. government? Was there something that you wanted to say to the world, to the citizens
Absolutely.
of America, as a Muslim working for the American government? I mean, you were surely getting attacked because you had to wear a head covering, and you obviously looked like some of the people that we were worried about at the time.
Yes.
So where were you coming? What was your position as a Muslim? Just personally for the American government?
Well, first, I was born in the United States. My parents came here to live the American dream. So they didn't come here as refugees or exiles from Iran after the revolution. They came here to live the American dream. My father has always been extremely patriotic. I was attending, Republican fundraisers with him since I was a little girl. He was the term is called a bundler for the Republican Party. He was appointed by Governor Wilson to the state medical board. I've always been extremely patriotic. Fast forward, I decided I needed a relationship with God, and Islam was a natural place to go because it was culturally what was familiar because of my background, my family background. But when I found out what radical Islam was doing, even here in the United States, I was horrified. And I was like, this is impossible. I basically applied my legal skills to countering the radical Islamic threat. And I wanted to make a point based on the community I was a part of and average everyday Muslims I met throughout my life as a Muslim, that this wasn't their fault, that there was a radical fringe of Islam that was hell-bent on taking over the world and killing everybody that came in their way.
Wow.
And I wanted to make the distinction between everyday Muslims that are just good-hearted people, happen to be culturally Muslim. They unfortunately abide by a God that is not actually God, which is an unfortunate situation, which is why I spread the gospel now. But they are sincere, good-hearted people. And I wanted to distinguish between that group of people and the terrorists.
Awesome. Let me first visit some of these people that are on. Please comment and let us know what you think. If you have any questions, if anything comes up where you want to know and want me to ask Hedieh a question, make sure and comment. We have Nalani on here.
Hi,
awesome.
Nalani.
Nice to see you. And then we have a gentleman from, I'm assuming it's
Assad from Kabul. Yes.
Hello from Afghanistan.
Assad means lion.
Oh, I'm so happy that you joined us. We may end up talking towards the end about the underground Christian movement that's in
Yes,
Afghanistan.
I'm so curious.
Amy Feltz is on. So glad y'all talking about this. Y'all, she's from Texas, obviously. Nalani says, wow, I knew you were awesome. However, your profile is phenomenal. We appreciate you. And Assad has some great things to say about this guy that we have in the White House. Joe Biden is a complete joke and a waste of space. That the way Biden left Afghanistan is irresponsible. We're going
to say the least.
We're going to get to some of that. So with that, what kind of emotions have been stirred up? I mean, it's been a while since you've been in the White House, but you worked so hard for so many years developing programs to keep terrorism at bay so that we could be safe here in the United States. And we have an administration, much like Assad just said, that is just a joke. What's happening today is it's an embarrassment. It's dangerous. Just what are your emotions and what's on your mind as we had these issues over the last couple of days?
Well, any of us that has spent any amount of time working on Afghanistan, whether it was in a diplomatic position or as a researcher or our amazing men and women that served in the armed forces, contractors, you name it, there is a overwhelming sadness. Mm-hmm. Not that this wasn't expected, that we failed and we will fail in Afghanistan, but that the amount of toil and treasure and lives lost to do something right, to have it end this way is just, it's criminal, it's offensive, it's depressing beyond measure. And then it just makes you a little worried about what does this mean? What's going to happen? Because it can't be sustained this way forever. So what are the new terror threats that will arise as a result of it? And where do we go from here in our diplomatic relationship with this part of the world?
You know, there's a lot of people that will say things on social media, or I've seen on the news as I've been watching, is that's been such a waste. And I want to caution people about that aspect of making such a blanket statement. Now, yes, there's been a lot of lives lost. There's been a lot of money spent and that kind of stuff. But essentially for the last 20 years, we've been terror free since we've gone there, that we've been fighting back. Is there something that we can say that it wasn't necessarily a complete waste? I mean, we're going to get into some of the money that's spent and some of the corruption, but there's got to be something that we can take away. I mean, the men and women that lost their lives, the families that have sons and daughters, and brothers and sisters, husbands and wives that have been killed in Afghanistan. I just hate for them to feel that it was for nothing.
Well, I don't say a total waste. There was a tremendous amount of waste. So it definitely wasn't a total waste. Actually, my article for the Christian Post talked about two of the greatest accomplishments. One is the gospel of Christ went forward in a very powerful way that was not possible and didn't exist in its entire, centuries of existence. The gospel hadn't gone forth. So that was a huge milestone for us, and will continue to be. The advancement we had for women and the relationships that they built is a tremendous victory for those women. We'll talk about what that means for them now. But I think we didn't need to accomplish a lot of that with the amount of money that we spent because of the massive corruption. And I think we could have had a much lighter footprint and accomplished a lot of those goals. And that's the part that's a waste. And we have been largely terror-free. I'd like to also point out is that the a lot of the terrorism was emanating from other parts once we had a massive presence in Afghanistan. So our presence in Afghanistan shifted the terror concerns like to Syria and Pakistan. And that's why we had the rise of ISIS and homegrown terrorists. We had hundreds of Americans being recruited to fight in Syria, which was a very, very difficult situation. That's at the time when I was at the FBI at headquarters. So it definitely wasn't a total waste, but we spent way more than we should have.
Yeah, we'll get to some of that. And so I need to set up this next question a little bit, because this has really been bothering me with a lot of issues. I mean, not just Afghanistan. We keep seeing this same story repeat over and over and over again. And it is that we have this guy in the White House who claims to be president, and people claim that he's president. And he spent 50 years in the Senate. He spent 8 years as vice president of the United States of America. He's now been in power only 7 months, but we can add that to his resume. And then we have military leaders. These guys. I don't even want to say their names.
4-star generals.
Yeah, just generals and that have been around probably for not only this recent war, but Desert Storm. We could probably go back even further with some of them. They've been around. Right? They've been in these other countries. They see how difficult it is to fight some of these wars against a religious faction, that it's not the same as somebody who simply wants to take over land, that there's a bit of a difference. We have these people that have experience. They've been to universities. They've been to some of the best military universities and academies on the planet. And then this happens and they say, oh, we didn't know. Oh, who? We thought it was going to be okay. Like, you just want to go, do you think we're stupid? I mean, do you really think that we're stupid, that you have no idea, no knowledge? Do they think we're stupid? You've worked with these people. You've worked side by side with them. You've had meetings with President Obama, with Bush.
Everybody I see on TV commenting, I've been in a meeting with.
You've worked with. And now they're saying, we didn't know. Yeah. It just kind of happened. Do they think we're stupid, or are they just really naive and stupid and just incompetent? Sorry, I went on a little bit of a rant there, but
no, it's a combination of being arrogant, foolish, and evil. And they're either all some of them are all three, some of them are one or two. But the example I often give is ISIS and the rise of ISIS and what we did in Iraq. And there are people sitting back in Washington who largely, for the most part, are secular or atheist. So most of our diplomatic corps don't believe in the impact of religion on people's lives. And when people like that are developing policy for countries that have been ruled by religion for 1,500 years, then there's an obvious disconnect that occurs when you're drafting policy and then you try to operationalize it on the ground. So though we keep making the same mistakes over again, that's why people in the Middle East think we're doing it on purpose. The people in the Middle East that Muslims think we created ISIS. Well, when we left all of our military equipment there and all the ammunition, and we unemployed 300,000 Sunnis, put on top of them the Shiites who just started to massacre them, then they said, well, you must have, and then we left. They said, you must have done this on purpose. Well, no, we didn't create ISIS on purpose, but it's a series of miscalculations that leads to that. So let's look at Afghanistan. How could these generals not anticipate what's happening? I use the very simple example of my little stint in the embassy. They were, the USAID folks came and gave this wonderful power presentation about having built a school. And it was in the outskirts where people didn't travel, and it was beautiful. It was these 3D renderings. Everyone was like, wow, that's fantastic. And then a very senior diplomatic official was like, wait a second, that school has not been built. You're lying. And they were shocked. They were shocked. What do you mean? Oh, we're not lying. How could you say we're lying? These are from the contractors. It's been built. He's like, I went in a helicopter with the Afghan government. That does not exist. And that epitomizes everything that happened in Afghanistan.
And it did not exist.
It had not been built.
And they had pictures and they said, hey, look at how beautiful it is.
Yes. And all of us in the staff of the embassy were like, what? I mean, because we weren't allowed to leave the embassy. I couldn't even go eat a kebab on the street corner. So I was like, what do I know? I wasn't even allowed to leave the building. So we were just kind of just stunned at how that can happen. That's just one example. That happened over and over and over again. So when we say we were training the Afghan National Police and millions of dollars went to U.S. contractors to train the National Police, to train the armed forces, they were coming back and giving reports to the generals in D.C. saying, this is what's been done. This is the training that went through. And even the generals that were stationed in Afghanistan, the reports were coming back. I mean, they can't micromanage these things. The reports were coming back. We did oh my God, I'm going to give you a dog example.
Okay, good.
A dog example. How many cases do you testify in where they said the dog's perfectly trained, find the narcotics on every time, sits and alerts? Those are the kind of reports the generals were getting about this army.
I get them every time.
You get them every time. Do you ever get a report
that this is amazing? The dog's never missed ever.
Do you ever get a report that this dog sucks? No.
Never.
Same thing in our military. This is a great army. They absolutely can take over. Do not, because the writing's already on the wall.
Wow.
The train has left the station. We already plan to leave. So the report is everything is fine. Don't worry about it. Whose fault is that? Should the generals have gone and checked? Should they have checked the guns? Should they looked at the target records, the target practice records of each of these guys? Should they have paid home visits? I mean, at what point do you say whose fault this is and everybody's passing the buck onto somebody else?
Wow.
And that's how you get this total chaos in an airport in less than 24 hours.
Well, just really quick, another story that I heard is they built an electric station for vehicles, for electric cars in the middle of Afghanistan, or it might have been even Iraq. I'm not sure which one. And you're thinking, well, why would you do that in an area that it's all about oil? Like, really? Who are you going to sell an electric car to in the Middle East when their lifeblood is oil?
Yeah.
Not going to happen. And they spend millions and millions of dollars.
It's just like revamping their university system to do gender studies.
Right. I heard that today. Yes. I heard a guy today literally saying, oh, we're going to have equity over in Afghanistan. We're like, you are freaking crazy.
Again, that goes back to not having an appreciation and understanding of the culture and of the people.
Wow. So what do you think the biggest reason or reasons this move occurred this weekend? I mean, Friday to Monday is when all this happened. What do you think? Why do we have such a disaster? How did this happen? Just now, like why did we need to do this today? Why did this need to happen this weekend?
Well, from what I understand, President Biden wanted it to happen on the anniversary of 9/11.
Oh, yeah,
like he thought that this was going to be a grand finale. I don't know how that calculation went so wrong, but like I said,
can you be tied to a date when you're dealing with something in the Middle East? Can you tie? Well, we're going to do this on the 4th.
Well, yeah, you can pick up your toys and go home any day you want.
Yeah,
so that's what we did. We picked up, and we didn't even take all of our toys. Have you seen those pictures of the empty police headquarters with tons of guns and machine guns and trucks? And so we just left.
Bulletproof Toyotas.
Yeah,
we're all left behind with the keys in them.
Exactly. And so Al Qaeda's going to have a fresh new face in a month.
All right. So what does this happen?
Ineptness. I told you, between arrogance, foolish, and evil people. It's a combination of the three.
Oh my gosh! I mean, the video of all the guns that were left behind in
because that's what we do. It's too expensive to bring them back. They say
you blow them up.
Yeah,
throw them in the ocean. We did a lot of that in Vietnam. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we can compare this situation to Vietnam and Saigon, the fall of Saigon. But at least they were taking the helicopters and dumping them in the ocean.
Ever since Iraq, we never did that. Or maybe they do. You know, some people could report that we did that with some stuff, the very sensitive stuff. But for the most part, we just leave it there. It's a horrible, horrible tragedy. And now the question is, and also I'd like to say that I think after we realized the American people did not have the stomach for nation building. So Iraq and Afghanistan, I was under a neoconservative administration. A lot of those folks were my friends, and they believed passionately in American exceptionalism and that we were going to export democracy. President Bush believed it wholeheartedly, that this is what we were put on the earth to do. And when the administration changed and we no longer were into nation building and everybody was exhausted from the whole somewhat silly notion of nation building, we didn't have another plan.
Right.
There never was another plan. So even an exit strategy, you want to end the combat and declare a detente or a victory, whatever you want to call it. We never developed a clear counterterrorism national security mission for Afghanistan, and then everybody would understand what we were doing there. It was just a leftover war.
Right. This is really the frustrating thing, because it just seems like we have so many clueless people. And
they're not.
I know, but it doesn't make any sense. I mean, as a police officer for 21 years, if there was a major incident, not just like a car stop, but if there was a major incident where there was an active shooter in some place, you had to almost always develop a plan, even a quick one, right? What are we going to do? Where's the shooter? Where are they at? Where are we going to enter from? Who's the entry team? I mean, you put all these things together. There's always a plan. It's almost like you have this, if I can use this and I'm going to try to use this as a comparison, but a building is dangerous. Maybe it's a 10-story building in the city that needs to be torn down. And, it has to be torn down to save people's lives. But it's full. It's got people in every part of the building and living everywhere in the building. And it's almost like you have somebody like Biden say, all right, well, then blow it up. And they blow it up. You go, well, what about the people? We've got to get the people out. That's like Afghanistan. He blew it up without getting the people out. Where the other person would say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to organize a way of getting these people out and get them out.
Let's give them the benefit of the doubt that they did internally have an idea, but it didn't go as they expected because of the other things we discussed. Yeah, but we're in Plan B right now, right? Yeah. We send other troops there to secure the airport, to get our folks out, and to give visas for the people that served as translators. And that's Assad's question was, how can other countries trust America? And quite frankly, most countries don't. Mm-hmm. For this exact reason, is that we lose heart and we abandon nations that serve. After a while, they no longer serve our interests, and we turn our back on them, which is a horrible experience and is not a good pattern.
There was a little bit of, during the election and all this kind of stuff happened. I said, okay, give these people what they want and let them see what it's like. I didn't know it was going to be this bad. I would have taken that all back.
Nobody
did. I said, well, give them this guy, and then watch what happens. The economy is going to tank a little bit and some other stuff. Who knew that he was going to open the borders, and so that when Afghanistan falls, that now the terrorists are able to now come through our southern border, which has already been happening, by the way.
Yes.
People from Syria, 100 different countries, we see immigrants coming through, terrorists, criminals, and that kind of stuff. Who knew it was going to be this bad? And then I see him there in the meeting overseas with all these other leaders of Germany and Canada and Japan, and you see him there, and that they can see that he's short of a couple cards in his deck, right? They can't not see that he has dementia, and yet they were praising him and well, thank God you're here. But now they got to be like very upset. Germany's got to be upset that they let Afghanistan fall the way that it did. Australia's got to be upset.
Absolutely.
Whoever else is over there, that is going to be affected by the Taliban taking over this country.
But I know you have very strong opinions of our current president, and I have strong opinions, not probably as strong as yours, but having worked under 5 presidents, I could tell you that it's really not the president that makes the difference. Mm. These cycles, as Trump referred to it as the swamp, these cycles continue administration after administration. And I was making quite a bit of money, like everybody else, doing the same thing over and over again for a different administration, for a different branch of the government. And I left because I got exhausted. I just couldn't do the same thing over again, expecting different results. The definition of insanity. Nothing ever changed.
There is one flaw, I think, with our system, is that we are often recreating the system, recreating the wheel.
Because what happens is a Republican administration comes in, the Democrats go into think tanks. Then the Democrats go into power, the Republicans go into think tanks, and the same people get recycled over and over again. So the essence, the groundwork, the foundation of our diplomatic corps never changes until somebody dies.
Right.
And so you wonder, like, oh my God, how did this happen again? It's because it's the same people doing it.
Right. I hear you say it all the time. When somebody will pop up on the news and you go, oh, what? I can't, they hired them again?
Literally, my entire LinkedIn, I'd say 80% of them are now back in the administration. They were all unemployed under Trump, and now all of them are back in the administration.
Wow.
Every single one of them has a
revenge.
Quite frankly.
Happening. Let's get to Assad. I think this is a good question. Go ahead. Can you read it?
Do you think it's reasonable to lose faith in God and not believe in God if your parents were killed by the Taliban?
That's a tough question.
No, for me, it's not actually.
No. It is
Assad, I don't know if you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, the one true God, or you're a follower of Islam. But one of the greatest things I came to the understanding of as a follower of Christ is evil people do evil things. God doesn't do them. And so I don't blame God for the evil in the world. I blame man, because we're essentially sinners. We have a corrupt nature and we do horrible things to each other, which we have done since the beginning of time. God is constantly trying to draw us towards him. The Old Testament and the New Testament is all about that experience until he sacrificed his own son to save us essentially from ourselves. But he never takes away free will. God has never taken away free will of man. So we have the opportunity to choose life and to choose righteousness or choose evil. And people inevitably choose evil. And that's not God's fault.
No. Wow. Thank you for that. That was a great answer. I have to read this next question because it involves some people that I'm not, or a person that I don't know. But this says, what I wrote here was, one of the excuses I heard today was from National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Is the reason that Joe decided to pull everyone of the military and civilians out of Afghanistan, the reason they had to leave and leave nobody there is because we, the United States, don't maintain a military presence in countries that are involved in a civil war. And then he went to answer this as the question was posed by appeared to be a South Korean a woman reporter, and saying, are they going to stick with us in South Korea? Are they going to stick with Japan? Are they going to stick with all the other countries that we have bases in as a support or a shield of protection from the enemy? But I found it strange that he said, well, we don't do that for civil wars, but we do it for external enemies of these countries. Does that make any sense to you at all? I just was dumbfounded.
Absolutely no sense, because in each of those examples, their presence there was preventing a civil war,
right?
Because it originated as a civil war.
East Germany, West Germany, South Korea, North Korea.
Yep. And even Japan, it was the emperor's forces against the democracy forces, or whatever we want to describe it, where we turned it into a nation against tyranny. So there's always forces internally that are pulling the country in two different directions. And we weren't there as a result of a civil war. We were there for a counterterrorism mission, trying to push them towards modernity. So we weren't there because of a civil war. Actually, our presence, it kind of exacerbated a civil war there. But that's not why we were there. And that's not why we should have stayed. We weren't there as a peacekeeping force. We should have had a laser focus that our mission remained a counterterrorism one.
So we could have maintained a presence based on our interest. The United States, there's nothing wrong. We were already there. We already had bases there. We already had equipment and people there that we could have maintained a presence as we'd have for the last couple of years. And I think on Tucker, we heard the other day, yesterday, that there hasn't been a military person, any military personnel that have been killed by the enemy, Taliban, whoever, Al-Qaeda, in the last year or so.
Right. And
so one of the other arguments I hear today is that, well, we were tired of having Americans killed in a place where we shouldn't be, but nobody's been killed. Our presence has actually provided us a little bit of safety for the last 20 years. We've not been attacked.
And I don't know logistically how it works because our servicemen and women are tired, and they've been exhausted and stretched way too thin. And our heart goes out to everyone who sacrificed, whether it was physically, emotionally, all the sacrifices that went into it. But I think there was maybe it's an internal policy for the Defense Department and the military to change it from combat missions, from deployments, to a security mission. and the deployments may be operated in a different way. Maybe it could have been more voluntary instead of mandatory deployments, especially those that had gone 3, 4, 5 times already. So I think there could have been internal policy changes that could have shifted the mission. But again, nobody, at least publicly, articulated that this is our new policy for Afghanistan. And people like to haphazardly blame this on Trump because he said he was going to withdraw. But the reality is Trump didn't withdraw.
Yeah, back to my building scenario, Trump would have taken the people out of the building before he blew it up.
Well, and the reality is he did not take the troops out because I think he listened to his advisors. Is like, it's precipitous. We can't take them out until we have a plan. And he didn't get a chance to articulate a plan. Yeah. And so he left them there.
And he changed the date.
Yes.
He moved it. And he would not have let this happen. One of the great thing about an interview I saw with Mike Pompeo today clearly stated that we had a plan. And he goes, I can't tell you the entire plan, but I'm telling you, I think that's what he said. He just said we had a plan. There's no way that this would happen under our administration. And I believe
that.
Pompeo. Mike Pompeo is
that's why he didn't do it.
Man.
No, but that's why Trump didn't do it.
Yeah. If you ever listen to one person, he may not listen to Milley or some of those other nitwits, but Mike Pompeo, I think he listened to. And Mike would have said, listen, let's do it this way. Let's do it that way.
Right. Who is in charge of our diplomatic corps?
Right. And that's who we should be listening to.
Right.
We could talk about police. We got congressmen and senators never been in law enforcement, never put a uniform, never been in a street fight ever in their entire lives, making policies about what police can and cannot do. You can't do that, right? We need to we need to find somebody. Okay, who has experience, and let's listen to what they have to say.
You don't know how many meetings I sat through about what we were going to do in these Muslim countries. And me and my colleagues would sit there and be like, these people wouldn't know a Muslim if a cane hit him in the head. It was at times so depressing and at other times comical because we used to joke, a lot of us used to joke that we wish there was this room with 10 evil men sitting plotting around a table to how they were going to take over the world. But in reality, the US government doesn't work that way at all. It's a series of comical, ridiculous errors, moving the Titanic, government run by 25-year-old staffers that are making policy that their bosses never read about countries they've never been to. I mean, it's really a bizarre system that I have to give credit to Trump trying to change, but I don't know how much of it he was actually ever able to change.
Yeah,
and it goes on.
He was on his way. That's why they did what they did. All right, so I want to talk about the relationship between Al Qaeda and the Taliban. Now, the guy's name was Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, who in the same press conference said that they're never going to be working together.
Like he has any credibility.
They're never going to be working together. They don't like each other. They've been warring for such a long time. He said, so we're not that
Since
concerned.
When have they been warring?
I don't know. That's what he said. He said they have different ideas and different things. They're not going to be working together. What do you know about Al Qaeda, the Taliban, and a potential relationship or a teaming up? Is that, I know it's complicated, but
Talib means the student. Taliban is the students. Okay, that's the Arabic meaning. Okay. Al-Qaeda is the base. So Al-Qaeda, the base of operation for the students. Oh, wow. So they were created almost symbiotically off one another. Bin Laden announces Al-Qaeda, the growth of Al-Qaeda, the base of which he's going to build the caliphate with the Talibs, with the students. So, oh my God, this drives me bananas when people say these things. And I hear reporters all the time talk about Al-Qaeda is going to reconstitute. Al-Qaeda never needed to reconstitute because it's still there. And people's talking about like the Taliban didn't have any power. When we sent researchers in back in 2010, we were alarmed and actually did not know how to report that almost everybody we interviewed said we're all Taliban. And we didn't understand what they meant. Like, what do you mean? He says, you don't understand. Talib is a student. It's the student of the doctrine. So it turned into a resistance movement against Western influence. So anybody who espoused conservative traditional Islam, even if they weren't Al-Qaeda, if they weren't terrorists, they preferred to be Talibs, students of the Taliban, than to be Westerners.
Wow. Why have you never explained this to me before?
I don't think you ever asked.
Who would ask? What part of the administration never asked? And like, well, they just kept.
Well, it reminds me of when I was sitting in these meetings at the Pentagon before we went into the invasion in Iraq. And the plan, as you all saw unfold, was that they were going to disband. Brennan disbanded his army. What's the guy's name that we deposed there? Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein's army. Yeah. And basically it's a minority Sunni that controlled the Shiites. And so our idea for decades. And so our idea was we were going to depose the Sunnis. There was like 300,000 of them, civil service, army, every branch of the government. And we were going to put the Shiites in charge. And I said, but wait a minute. People like me were like, wait a minute, but the Shiites are next door in Iran. The Shiites of Iraq in power next to the Iranians is a disaster. They're going to team up against us. And they're like, oh, no. The Iraqis and the Iranians hate each other. They were in a civil war. They were in a war against each other. I said, you don't understand religion. The Shiites will always unite against the Sunnis and then worry about the fallout later. It's a
common enemy.
It's a common enemy.
Right.
Nobody listened. And now what? Iraq is a hotbed of Iran influence.
Right.
And we again picked up our toys and left.
You tried to tell him.
Oh, yeah. It was. Who listens to me? I told you that's why I ended up leaving DC. Even when you watch the news, I was like, I can't listen to this again. I can't listen to the people saying this over and over. Literally 22 years of my life, I heard the same things. I mean, I called my old boss a couple months ago when I saw the new FBI report come out. I was like, dude, we wrote this 5 years ago. And he's like, oh, you noticed? It's like, this is crazy. Yeah. But and to that point, I think as upset as I am about Afghanistan, the thing that upsets me and concerns me to no end is the policies and programs we built in countering violent extremism now being used against Christian Americans. That is really what is my biggest concern now.
Well, that's my next question.
Oh, is it? Okay.
So now this disaster is taking place. What is your biggest concern with Afghanistan, or what is the thing that keeps you awake or gives you hope?
Okay, I have to separate America from Afghanistan. So for Afghanistan, my biggest hope is the gospel, because the greatest hope that we have to offer them is the gospel of Christ, and that will bring the peace, the freedom, the redemption of lives lost and futures that look dark. It's only the gospel of Christ that will solve that problem. My biggest concern is for the Western influenced Afghans that relied on us, that developed programs as a result of us. Their program, all that money's going to dry up. Their safety's now in jeopardy. Their families are being slaughtered. It's a horrible, horrible bloodbath. And I can't say how that's going to turn out. I don't know who's going to offer an alternative, who's going to step up. I don't know if any of the Western nations are going to step in at this point. It's going to be left, as Carol says, to Russia and China, and God knows what kind of future that means for them, because that's purely economic. They could care less if the women died by a stoning every single day.
As far as I've heard, it's happening already.
Absolutely.
They've said, oh, we're going to have women in our government. Did you hear that? That they've said they're going to have women in their government? Of some sorts of roles in their government. How are they going to get there? They can't drive, but they're knocking on doors,
yes.
and they're looking for people that have helped the Americans and helped the other allies that we had there. They're using for instance, the helicopters have certain infrared things and things, thumbprints and things that you do to get them started, I'm guessing. And so they're able to use and take some of that information and go compare it to people that are still in country. Yes. Other Afghans, and they're seeking out those people, checking for papers and all that kind of stuff. And then we have the issue that we're hearing Pastor Jack Hibbs from Calvary Chapel talk about, where they're already selling off young girls as wives to the Taliban leadership, and maybe not even the leadership, just some of the people that are working. That is definitely something that is just really disheartening. I saw a message you sent me about they're going after the missionaries now.
Oh, for sure.
And And it's tough. And I hear you bring up the gospel, and we do a devotional every day. We talk about Jesus Christ and how amazing he has been for us in our lives. But it's these times that I can see where people would struggle with that, understanding that you got these Christians that are stuck in Afghanistan when they're asked by the Taliban, "Are you a Christian?" And
but I think for the most part, they knew what they were up against in Afghanistan. I mean, it's illegal. The punishment is death.
Yep.
So you
can't travel to countries.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably 20 countries I can't travel.
You'll be arrested and you'll be executed
and tried
yep.
for apostasy from the airport. I wouldn't even get into the country. They could seize me at the airport. So I think the missionaries knew what they were getting themselves into, and God bless them for the power, the courage, the internal fortitude it takes to do that. But it's just like us telling the Taliban to negotiate with our demands for human rights and modernization when they're fighting over eternity.
Right.
You know, it's go tell a Christian to denounce Jesus and then you'll live. You won't do it.
Right.
99.9% of Christians won't do it.
Correct.
So why would you think a Muslim would?
Yeah, you're right. You had a second part to your answer, I think.
About America.
Yeah.
Let's get to Amy's question, and then we could shift to America.
Okay, go ahead and read it.
What's the difference between Trump's previous agreement with the Taliban and Biden's current agreement? As far as I'm aware, we don't have any agreement with the Taliban. The successive administrations. It started in Obama. We're trying to negotiate a seat at the table for the Taliban. And to me, again, this is just ridiculous. For people that are trying to fulfill their godly mission to make a caliphate from which to attack the rest of the world, to give them a seat at the table as if they're going to play nice is absolutely absurd. It's like Lebanon. Hezbollah has a seat at the table and is constantly wreaking havoc in Lebanon. It never worked. It doesn't work anywhere because Muslims that are trying to live in this apocalyptic mindset on what they believe Islam is telling them to do can never sit at the agreement in a democracy.
Right.
They can't sit at the table.
Is that like these peace accords that they had in the Middle East, and they never had them before because they were saying that, Palestine has to be involved somehow. And you would never get them to agree to anything. And so finally Trump said, all right, forget them.
Yeah.
Let's do it without them.
UAE is more than happy.
Right.
They're more than happy to have a peace agreement because they're like, it's not our land. No, UAE, it's impossible to have it with Palestine, but UAE didn't have a problem with having a peace agreement with Israel because it's like, that's not our land.
So here we have the Taliban, and the Biden administration is saying, well, we did it because Trump had made this impossible agreement. But what is that? There's no agreement, right? There's negotiations. There's negotiations. There's tries. Let's do this, and you give me this, I'll give you that. And he is a negotiator, but there's no agreement. We never went onto a battleship like we did in World War II and sign an agreement. None of that ever happened.
Yeah, and the Taliban would, out of one side of their mouth, say, yeah. we want a seat at the table.
Right.
But we're going to decide what the table's going to look like.
I think another thing Jake said, well, we didn't want to go back on our Trump's agreement, but they went back on every single everything else
that Trump ever did.
Right. But he was there going, well, we didn't want to go against, he didn't have a list.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, Amy, I don't know the exact details of the Trump agreement. I just know that there were negotiations about including Taliban into the government. But to me, those are never really sincere or longstanding because they didn't actually get to the point where they had a seat at the table, as far as I understand.
Okay. All right. Back to the second part of your earlier question.
Oh, my biggest concern is
cliffhanger.
My biggest concern is for Americans. And actually, I used to train security forces on this issue that the greatest threat, I think, that poses to the United States is a civil war. And just to see the DHS use the language that we so painstakingly drafted to avoid mentioning Islam, that now looks evil. The intent was evil, or it just happens to be our bad luck, that it purposely grievance-based ideology and all of these words that we came up with to avoid saying Islam are now being turned against conservative Christians. And that's just horrifying, because if you understand the breadth and scope of that security apparatus in this country, for that to be turned around against everyday citizens like you and me, we're in trouble.
Yeah. Well, we saw the list of terrorist threats that the administration.
Anti-vaxxers, people who are against the vaccine, people who don't like COVID restrictions.
Or the result of the election.
People who question the election.
We're on the list now with Al Qaeda and the Taliban.
It's unbelievable. It's unreal. It really is unreal. And it's frightening, quite frankly.
So, I'm sorry, I got lost in that.
Amy saying, so Trump and Biden's effort to even talk with them were futile. Correct. Yes, in my opinion. For those of us that see, again, if you don't understand the role religion plays in other people's lives, then you keep doing the same thing over again, expecting different results. We've tried this in every Muslim country in the world. The only country where we've actually brought terrorists into the government at the seat of the table, and we continue to talk to that government, is Lebanon. Look at Lebanon. They have a civil war and an outbreak. Their downtown has been bombed repeatedly. They can't even have a single building standing because it keeps getting bombed by either the Israelis or internally by Hezbollah. Right. Or look at Iran. That's another example of radical Islamists in power that haven't left in 30 plus years. So you can't negotiate with people whose worldview is diametrically opposed to anything you could possibly see as acceptable. They'll lie to you, but it's never acceptable unless they come to you and renounce their doctrine. They would never do that. It's just like telling a Christian to come and renounce Christ.
Right. And the saying that America's got the clocks, but we have the time.
Exactly.
Is exactly.
All they have to do is wait us out.
Because the guy that just got released by Obama, not just, but was released by Obama from Guantanamo, is now in charge of Al Qaeda and is the leader. And he goes, I wasn't worried. I knew this. I knew I was going to be released, and I knew I was going to be back in charge. And he didn't even blink. And now he's sitting in the palace. I think they're in. Is it Kabul? What's the
Kabul?
Yeah, Kabul. What did I say it?
Kabul.
Yeah, you say things a little differently. Yeah. Wow. I thought maybe I'd be happier after this this interview. I don't even know. I mean, the only thing that I know that we have for a potential solution as we go forward is we have to start locally. I mean, we have to start this fight locally. And then branch out.
Fight against
our own communists, our own Al Qaeda, our own Taliban, which is
that's exactly what they want us to do, so they can arrest us.
Well, I'm not fighting that way. Fight by being at the school board meetings, by putting different people in place in our
preserve democracy before we have no more democracy to preserve.
We have to start locally.
Yes.
There's no other way around it, because we don't have another election for another 3 years. Can you believe this dude has only been in power for 7 months?
Right, but the policies have been in place for so long. Like I told you, everybody that is in his administration, I know literally half of them personally. I've worked with them for decades. So it's just a recycled administration. Everybody wants to blame him because he's Creepy Joe, but it's a whole team of hundreds of people that are DC dinosaurs, legends.
I think we're out of the questions I already had prepared, but I think you touched on it, but I just want to go a little bit deeper in the financial corruption that people probably know a little bit about. They probably have an inkling that there's something going on, but how deep is that? How bad is it? And
to me, actually, that's one of the worst parts. After the loss of life, and the treasure that the Americans have lost, the American taxpayer, is the level of corruption. And again, this is, I think, a failing of us as a people, because the corruption's on our end. We expect them to be corrupt. We have to lower our expectations of what we think of other nations. But what did our contractors do? How did they lie to the generals that they said they were training? How many boxes did they tick, saying that these things were done when they weren't? We spent millions of dollars for private security contractors, and in turn, that money was paid to the Taliban to protect our trucks and to get cement in. And we paid for cement and steel to build roads 400, 500 times over because the roads never got built. Why did the roads not get built? Because the Taliban was shooting at us with the money we gave them to protect us. I mean, the level of corruption is just horrific. We had farmers that said, we want to sell wheat. We want them to change the poppy fields into wheat fields. And we're like, wow, that's fantastic. We're going to change it to an agriculture that they can export and it'll make a great business. I mean, it was great intentions. And what did they do? So the Afghan farmers pulled up all the crops that they had that weren't poppy and started planting poppy so they can get the free seeds and sell them.
Wow.
Poppy production increased threefold.
Oh my gosh. And it was Americans.
Keep selling the wheat, even though we knew what was happening to it.
They're skimming off the top. You got
Everybody's
contractors,
skimming.
you got security contractors.
Everybody's living large.
Oh, wow.
Everybody's living really large. I mean, it's a huge amount of money. The last Afghan project that we were supposed to be a part of before I left that we didn't take was a $250 million grant. So the parent NGO, and there's about 7 or 8 of them, would get the entire corpus and then dole it out to individual partners to do small pieces of
NGO stands for?
Non-governmental organizations.
How many?
$250 million.
$250 million.
Most USAID grants, there's nothing under $200 million.
Wow. Well, thanks for that good news, too. You are just so full of good news.
Why do you think I moved here and married you? And hang out and eat tacos?
I don't know. Now I know.
You see? It's like
Thank God.
I surprise Andy all the time with all these like little things. I'm like, I've never been a passenger in the car. I've always had to drive. He's like, what? Just these little things that make life just so beautiful now.
Yeah.
I don't have to go to these crap hole countries anymore and do the same nonsense over and over again and expect different results.
That was shocking. That was yesterday.
Yeah.
We're driving around and she goes, you know what? I've never been a passenger before.
Is that crazy?
I go, well, if I would have known that, you can be my driver.
No.
It would be so weird. I couldn't do that. Well, thank you for all this information. It really is important to get this information out. I'm sure that there's even more that we didn't get to that we could speak about. But
anybody have any questions before we sign off?
yeah, if you have anything before we sign off, that would be awesome. If you have anything.
Assad from Kabul, I don't know if you're still there, but we'd love to talk to you. If you had any other questions too, it's so exciting to have somebody on from Kabul.
Yes, interesting. And are you in hiding, or are you?
Yeah.
What's going on? I do want to know. I thought about asking that earlier, but I didn't want to, tip off anybody where he's at.
That's true too.
So concerned. But
God bless you, protect you, keep you,
at least he's able to
and
get
your family
on the internet.
Yes.
Because sometimes that's one of the things. That's one of the tactics.
Yes.
You shut off the internet.
I expect that.
Yeah, I thought it was going to happen too. I just lost my train of thought. Our pastor,
Yes.
has been talking a bunch about some of the things he's doing. I think he said there's 8 missionaries.
It rescued 11.
Did you?
Let's speak a little bit about that. First of all, we need everybody to be praying, of course, to stand in the gap for all of not only the Afghans that will now suffer, but the Americans, the Europeans, the missionaries that are stuck there, the people that are in hiding, that have worked for the U.S. government, that have helped in some way, that have participated in our programs, whose lives are now in jeopardy. And we ask you to pray for them. But there'll also be a lot of Afghan refugees coming into the United States. And if you're in a refugee resettlement zone, that's Minneapolis is one, the greater D.C. area, D.C., Maryland, Virginia. I had a refugee resettlement, like a social services network when I was back there. California is one that if you're a believer, do what you can to introduce them to the gospel. Because I know a lot of people are very hesitant and they think it's rude or they think it's inappropriate. But one of the things I've heard that I love, that I think is one of the best ways to introduce the gospel, is asking somebody about their faith and their belief system and say, I'd like to learn about it and understand what their belief system is. And then say, would you mind if I shared mine? I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and he forgive me for my sins. Share from your personal perspective so that they can hear you and experience it a third person, basically. So you're not proselytizing, saying you have to become a Christian, but basically say how Christ has changed your life. And I think that that's really important. Break bread with them, welcome them into your home. One young gentleman, I'll never forget, it was so sad, is he was in our program. We were providing social services to him. We had 2 Dari speakers on our staff, and he was jumped and he was mugged. And he was in the hospital. He was badly beaten. And when we went to go visit him, he said, sometimes I wish I would just go back to Afghanistan. He's like, I survived the Taliban easier than this. And it's devastating when you realize that people are running out with just a suitcase and they're coming to a country that they think is hostile to them, and not realizing that we have an opportunity to show not only graciousness, but again, sharing the gospel of Christ and changing someone's life forever, for an eternity.
Right. I love that. Everything you said. I do have a negative side of them bringing 40,000.
Oh, there will be the
Afghanistan.
negative. Why do you think I'm telling them to share the gospel? Because there is a negative side to that. I've seen the negative side.
How many of them are going to be Taliban thinking, I'm a refugee, please let me in, I'm running from the Taliban?
That goes to Danielle's question, because she says, why weren't the people promised visas fast-tracked? If you know anything about our immigration system, it is almost impossible to fast track anyone because it has to go through DHS. There's a department in Department of Homeland Security that has to do a background check, which in chaos is virtually impossible. And there is this hesitancy about letting them in because of fear of what they're capable of. And especially young men. So we have certain criteria of people that we do not allow in. And so that's going to be another element of this tragedy, is people that will not come in and therefore possibly lose their lives.
Yep. And Carol brings up a point. I was just going to mention this too, is that what I heard is tens of thousands of these immigrants are going to be brought to Texas, in addition to the millions that are coming through our southern border. I mean, they just hate Texas. I know. They are doing everything they can.
That's not foolish. That's evil. They're purposely doing it to Texas.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because they're trying to change the constituency of Texas, the demographics of Texas.
I'm sure they bring some to Florida too.
For sure.
But Fort Bliss is where I did hear that, and Carol is correct. I did hear that. We just brought that up, right?
And Carol says, an army. Well, that's the thing, Carol, is that it's an opportunity for us to turn them into an army of Christ. They come often scared, afraid, discombobulated, and God willing, it's a time where we share the gospel and have them go. Because I'll tell you from personal experience, Muslims on fire for Jesus are some of the most powerful believers you'll ever find. So to the extent we could share our faith with them and bring them towards Christ would definitely be a good thing for us.
And for our friend in Afghanistan, and for anybody that you could come in contact, send them to resurrectministry.com.
Yes.
resurrectministry.com.
Happy to help.
That is your ministry for,
yes,
especially for
this
Muslims.
Purpose.
Yep.
Yeah.
So send them there. Well, thank you, my friends. We got on for an hour. I was going to try to keep it short because I wanted lots of people to watch this. But if you could do me a favor, please, and share this out as much as possible. We'll get Priscilla's comment in just one second. But please share it out to your social media, to your groups, whether it's the Facebook post or the YouTube channel. Again, we're on Twitter and we're on Twitch. Not on Twitch on this broadcast, but Facebook, YouTube, and 2 different Twitter sites. So people need to hear what Hedieh had to say. I think a lot of what you said is very important for people to understand some of
I hope it helps.
the inner workings, and that none of this is a mistake. I don't believe. I think much of it is obviously on purpose, and there's other hidden agendas, and people are getting rich from this. There is some belief that China and Russia did have a hand in this, that they both benefit greatly from this happening.
Absolutely.
Getting the United States out of there. Our embassy being closed in Afghanistan, theirs are going to be thriving. They've already taken selfies in front of their
just like embassies. China thrives in Iran.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Russia too.
I don't have a good feeling about our administration and what their hand is and what they're going to be benefiting from them happening. I know, conspiracy theory. I know, but I'm telling you, nothing will surprise me. There's nothing.
Global politics are not conspiracy theories.
Thank you.
Priscilla's like, why did we leave like that? Half of the interview, definitely, Priscilla, is about that. So I encourage you to watch the first half because we talked about that in great detail.
And then Amy says,
we make it nearly impossible. Amy, this is the definition of insanity. It's impossible for people to come legally, but illegally is easy. And how does that not encourage illegal immigration? I don't know. It's just, it's insane. It's insane how broken some of the system is. And I hearken back to President Trump and my visions of him at a table saying, why the fuck are we doing this? You know what I mean? Like, why is it? Because he's just a businessman saying, why does this happen like this? And then, and they call this person, call that person. And I know how that goes because you call this person and that person and, in DHS and then they pass the buck and then they pass the phone to this guy and then they pass it to that guy. And nobody's head ever rolls because there's always somebody else to blame it on.
Right.
It's housing and administration. It's the ATF. It's DHS. There's always somebody else in some other office in some other building that you could blame for why this happens this way.
Right. It's like taking over a failing business. You just come in and go, what the heck?
Trying
when
to
you
turn
took
the
over
Titanic.
my accounting, it's like somebody else's way isn't always, it's their way, but you come and take over somebody's account and it's like, what?
Why were you doing this?
Why are there 10 steps to do this? But it should have been one step.
Yeah.
But when it gets to the government, there's no better organization that could make a mess out of buying a plunger for the toilet.
Yeah.
And cost maybe $10,000-$15,000 for that plunger.
Yep.
And then everybody goes, well, give me my 10,000, give me my 10,000. And by the time you're done, it's a $50,000 plunger.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Hedieh. One more. Amy had to go to YouTube.
Uh-oh.
What happened?
We're glitching. We're glitching in Facebook. Well, I just lost my Instagram account. So
her Instagram account
gone.
Fini. Just years of development and growing it, and they just took it from me.
Just took it. No explanation.
Wow.
You violated community standards. I'm like, by talking about Jesus, I'm not exactly sure.
Wow. All right, my friends. Thank you again for watching. Please share our message out as often and as to as many groups and places as you possibly can. Again, I think that people definitely need to hear what you had to say. Super important. All right. Anything else, Hedieh?
Thank you.
Did we miss anything?
No, that's it. Thank you, friends, for joining us. It was awesome spending time with you.
All right. Take care.
Bye.